you can make amazing, valuable pieces of furniture with subpar wood if you know this technique. I got thinking about this technique, which you may have already seen in your home. It's often applied over plywood edging. And this is a huge thing because anytime I go to these woodworking shows, there are these huge machines that are called edge banders. And these edge banders, a piece of plywood slides by this large machine, heats up this gluey tape, which is actually a kind of wood veneer, and glues it on the edge. And then as it's traveling out past the edge bander, it trims it off flush. So a piece of plywood like this goes in one end. You see all that layering, so you know it's just a plywood. And when it comes out the other end, it's covered with solid edging. So here's a piece of like birch or maple plywood. This is a piece of, you know what, it's been so long since I had this. This actually looks like maple. So we've got this edge banding would wrap a piece like this and it would make it appear to be a solid panel, but you'd have all the advantages of the stability of plywood. So great in the kitchen cabinet world and all kinds of cabinets in general. But what makes this magic and go through there is that it's coated with a gluey layer on the back that has a melting, it melts at a fairly low temperature, so it'll melt and it'll bond right onto that edge. So I'm going to demonstrate how this works very quickly. Let's put this piece of maple plywood in here, and we'll just quickly break off a piece of tape. It's fun to use this when you've been trying to do fine furniture for a while. You can just grab a piece of this tape, set it right on there, and you just need a household iron will work fine. I don't know what the temperature is. Maybe somebody who's nerded out on this can let us know. But I'm just going to move along. I've got it set on high right now. And I know that's getting on that edge nicely. You don't expect to tune into a fine furniture episode and see someone ironing edge banding. But hey, there's no shame in this. All right, so once it cools down, I can already feel I can't lift that. See, it's nice. Now, in a nice edge banding machine, this thing slides by, that heat presses this on, and then it goes by some trimmers. But we're going to use the old-fashioned way of trimming this rather than using a router or a knife edge. We're going to use a file, a mill file with a little serrated edge on there. And I'm going to push down. See how I'm skewing my cut, pushing down? And this is pre-finished, so I'm going to kind of ruin it a little bit. And just let it cut. Oh, the glue is getting stuck on there. So you do it just like that. This is not great, but you can see how much experience I've had with edge banding. But there we go. So we would scrape that, and then it would get sanded. And unlike this side, right, I've got, you know what? I just got a lot of experience on that side, so watch how fast this goes. Oh, wow. There. I knew something was wrong the way I was handling that. And then on the ends, rather than, you can just take a chisel. Is it going to be wide enough? Yeah. And set the bevel there. And just chop it right off. There you go. And just like that, we have a beautiful edge on there. See? So that's what a little finish on there, and you're going to look just like the maple. So you get that solid look. Well, we want to borrow this idea, this approach to veneering, but make our own custom iron-on veneer. Sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. What I'm going to do for demonstration is use one of my favorite stash materials some of you have seen already, and that is Cuban mahogany. But look at how beautiful that stripy ribbon is. That is that's where you're getting more into the rift and quarter sawn version of the material. And in the middle here we have the flatter plain sawn. See how kind of boring it is? That's where the growth rings are plain or flat to the cut. So then once you get out of flat where the growth rings are now starting to wrap around over here, you start to see this whole different pattern. Same material, but way more dense and more interesting. With mahogany, it shows up on the rift and quarter sawn as stripes, like ribbon. It's changing direction there. Here's another material that I just got from our little sample pile. This is beeswing satinwood. And this, I'm just grabbing one piece. There's so many options you have, but can you imagine if you had a stash of this, you could use the same technique I'm about to use on whatever piece of furniture you're dealing with and iron it on and have a very contemporary look for not much cost. In fact, this is one of the cheapest presentations I think I've made in a while, because you really don't need any tools. You just need some decent veneer, some white glue. Who doesn't have white glue? And you just need a household iron. You already have one of those. So what I want to do is use this method to put some of this Cuban mahogany on a leg like this. Like this is poplar. I could wrap the poplar, but I haven't been working with the poplar today. I'm going to actually wrap a piece of cherry. Now you might say, why were you going to do that? Well, I had a lot of cherry legs and this is what I'm going to use. So it's a nice wood. It'll look more like mahogany on the end grain too. But we're going to get a really good bond. So this is going to be a nice technique. Now, I'm using white glue, and white glue specifically because of its characteristic that it has a lower melting point than other yellow glues. So you have regular Type Bond and then Type Bond 3. Anyway, it's in the PVA family, polyvinyl acetate glue, which is a type of like plastic. So after it cures or dries to a hardened film, it only takes a fairly modest amount of heat for it to re-liquefy or plasticize. And if you put a little of this glue on both surfaces and let it dry, it doesn't have to be dry for hours and hours. You can do it as soon as it gets clear. Then you iron it, it will adhere and have a tremendous bond to that surface. Now, this is not you don't go crazy with this, all right? Don't go ironing it on every tabletop you find. It's not ideal for ironing on panels. In fact, you'll see the wood actually shrinks a little from the heat in the iron. And it's very difficult to control gaps or surface. You'd be better spending your time learning how to use hide glue if you're really interested in heat pressing veneer. However, this technique comes in handy for little edges that are sometimes challenging or whatnot. I would always opt for spreading the glue first with a caul before going to this method. So here's the way you get prepared. You've got to get it on one surface, or actually both surfaces I mentioned, and get going with the glue. So let's just do the inside of this leg. And as far as applying the glue here, I've got the glue in the tray already. So we'll put it on with a roller. White glue in a brown pan. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna use some of this beautiful ribbon. So we would just prepare this by just rolling on there. So it's almost like we're gonna use wallpaper here, like wallpaper paste going on there, right? And this gets rolled on until you have a nice full coating like that, okay? And then You're just going to let it dry until it's clear. Do the same on the leg or whatever you're working on that you want to bond to. Oops. Now you're not stuck with using a household iron. You can use, there are little veneer press irons that you can buy specifically for wood, and those will work fine. So you're going to get it on the leg. Let's put it on this surface too. And put a good generous amount on there. Okay? And you're going to let that dry until clear. So once it's clear, you're going to repeat the process. Just roll it right on that clear to make sure you get a full coating on there, and it's going to give you enough glue to plasticize and bond to each other. It doesn't take that long. It takes, here it was drying in about half an hour. It was going clear. So it would take you an hour to get this ready, at least. I would say a minimum plan on that. So it's kind of nice. You just plan to do other things. Got to get your stuff ready. Then you come back to this and you'll see how fast it goes. Once your material is sized, it'll look like this. So here's a piece. Let me put it the same way. This is the same mahogany, but it's kind of rubbery. It's got 2 coats of blue on there. And on the other side, it's a little shiny too. Now let's do this leg. Now this leg, look, it's cherry. It's got sapwood on the inside, but I've already applied 2 coats to this cherry on these 2 sides. So let's go ahead and see about putting some veneer on there. Now, what's cool is you can use the grain to your advantage. So if this were an outside leg and I've got my taper running out like that, I want to try to plan the grain to kind of sweep outward too and give it more of a visual effect of it splaying rather than diving in against the taper. So I've got this grain, it's kind of sweeping out here at the bottom. So let's put that on this side and it will end up sweeping out and appearing to splay. All right, so I'm going to just, I guess I don't even have to cut it. I'm going to flip it over, hold that spot. I like how it looks right there. Flip it over. And now I'm just going to iron it on.
Tom, Lee's curious if you can prep this days before.
I usually, yes, it can go. You can do it the day before. I've done classes where we've done that, and I've prepped it. I don't know. I don't know the answer to how long you can do this before it starts to go bad or gets outside the window of ironing well. But I bet it could be up to a week, easy. Then it's going to start to cure really harder and harder. But I don't know. Or just get, come to think of it, you could try it. It probably does last quite a while because once it gets hard, it will replasticize. But it's in that early 24 to 48 hour period that it seems to be the most friendly to it because it's not quite reached those higher properties. But there, I've just ironed that on right through the wood. See, it's stuck. And it's stuck on there.
Oh, that's cool.
Right? So now we want to get it off there. So I'm just going to take a veneer saw. I'm going to make a cut right along here. And I'm just going to use the leg as my guide for this little saw. We learned and we tuned it up in the class several times so it would cut like a razor teeth. There we go. Then we'll come to this other side. You could cut around this and use a router, whatever. But where's the fun in that? Okay, there. So now I'll just go across up here. Actually, I'm just going to break this off so I don't cut across too far. Man, it is kind of leathery. It's tougher when it's all glued up. Okay, you can just chop across the end grain, break this off, and then we'll saw across this top section right here. And then let's check it out. Yeah, we've got a nice Cuban mahogany front, but that still doesn't look like much. So let's put another layer here. Now, normally I would get that on there and then I would roll. So I'd have a little glue along that edge of veneer now that doesn't have glue on it. But let's see if it sticks. I usually put some on there, but maybe we can get away without it. But see how the grain is running this way? It's sweeping out with the taper. Now I'm going to think about the same thing as I put it on this one. I'm going to I've got the taper running that way, so I'm going to turn it this way. Okay, that looks good. Set it on there. Let's flip it over and iron away. This reminds me of the days early in our marriage when I did all the ironing. Remember that?
Yep. Somebody just asked if you iron.
They probably saw that I had just a natural
You do iron your own stuff.
style for it. Ironing's not as big a thing these days. Is that true? Do you think?
Well, most people do go out in public. So yeah, they do iron.
No, but
We don't iron very much because
it's more associated with dress shirts, like, and people don't wear suits as much like men, but I think probably women use irons as much.
So Tom, I'm getting some questions about the longevity of this kind of veneering, and does it last as long as a veneer press, and how fragile are the edges? Those kinds of questions.
The edges will be right on tight. I just break the edges and I'm good to go. I have made some pretty fancy furniture with this technique in places where I needed it, and I've never had a problem. But I haven't time tested this to tell you the truth. I mean, but I'm telling you, you're getting a really good bond. I know the glue people don't want you using this method if you don't have to, because I'll bet you, I don't think you get quite the same, but you get a tremendous bond when you use glue the regular way more than the wood fibers themselves. So you have to try this to see how hard it's on there. It would be hard to pull it off once you let it cool and cure all the way. Someone should do a test on that. I'm not
Jack
that
said
kind
he
of...
did some box tops 30 years ago, and they're still stuck on.
Thank you, Jack. I knew you'd come through. Yeah. All right. So I guess I'm not teaching Jack anything new. It's 30 years. Sorry, Jack, if this is tiresome. You should be teaching this one. Where are you? I know where you are.
Probably watching with Sarah.
Say hello. Hi,
How
Sarah.
thick is the piece of veneer? How thick a piece of veneer can be used? Michael's asking.
I'm not. I think I wouldn't go much thicker than regular veneer. This is 1/42 of an inch thick, and you need the heat transfer, to work well. So I'm not sure how thick you go before you start losing enough of that. So here we are up on the top. We'll just saw across this one. There we are.
Tony's asking, Tom, do you work around the leg so you have one overlap on each side?
Yes, great point, Tony. Wow. You get the badge for the bonus question of the week. Well, I always, when I was nerding out on this, I've made pieces of furniture. In fact, that sideboard, I didn't iron this on, but it's general practice when you're veneering that you think of the furthest away surface you veneer first. Then, like, imagine this leg was facing you. you would veneer the back first, then the sides, because the sides, the veneer is going to overlap the back. So you'd have the most solid look from the front. And then the front would go on last because that overlaps the sides. But you know what? After you veneer this, you're going to sand it. And I just take the sandpaper. Now we've only got 2 sides done, but let's treat it. I'll start with 150 here, but I'm not going to try to be perfect about it. But I mean, that feels like solid wood already. This is when a piece breaks off. And
Any concern for bleed through? Erskine's asking if your veneer is too thin. Is that?
I think that would be more of an issue when you're using liquid glue, because this is already, I've never experienced that, where the glue comes through here. I suppose it could happen, but I don't think it gets quite that liquidy. It does. I wish I could see what's happening like under there, like how liquidy or plasticized, what it looks like.
So can you finish what you were saying? You start with the back, then you do the 2 sides.
Yeah, yeah. So what that does is it's always overlapping from the eye, the most common viewpoint. You're not going to see the joint. But what I was just trying to get to here was that it almost doesn't matter, because where that veneer overlaps, it's just a 42nd of an inch. And what happens is you're going to break this edge. It's sharp right now, but I'll come down with a piece of 150 grit. I'm kind of skewing it to just soften that edge. I don't want to round it over, but I'm just softening it a little bit. Then I'll come along with 220. If this were a real leg, let's just give it a quick. Break that edge a little more. I'm not rounding it. I just want it crisp. I mean, soft to the touch. Okay. So there, when you break that edge, you're breaking it almost the thickness of the veneer. So you get a little round over, and it's very hard to even detect that edge of veneer. You know, that seems to be stuck on there. Maybe you don't need to. Maybe you don't need to put glue on that little edge when you overlap. But man, that feels like a solid Cuban mahogany leg now. But look, it's still cherry. But
So when you do the front, Tom, how does that front one overlaps? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the front one's last, so it's covering the side veneer. So you've got the full sheet. There's no veneer coming up on the side. But what I was trying to say was you're going to break that edge, and you barely see it anyway. But in order, I always try to practice that sequence so that you just get the best possible look. And
Mark's curious, how is the bottom of the leg treated as far as not having a straight edge that could chip out?
I make sure I break that edge hard. So I want to break it. I mean, you can use a plane. I'll just show you with a piece of 150 grit. I really kind of break that hard. You want to get the veneer back off of the ground level, right? And usually I'm using a wood that's the similar color to the veneer on top, so it's no big deal breaking through. So when you put finish on this, that cherry on the foot will look a lot like Cuban. In fact, let's put some finish on this. I just happen to have a little shellac right here, but let's go ahead and get some of this shellac on here just to see the difference. Look at that beautiful Cuban. Okay, and then let's go to this side.
So I'm going to ask this question because I'm not sure if he's curious about, he's asking about stain. You're using shellac, so.
Yeah, this is just clear.
Anthony's saying if you stain the piece afterwards, does the glue joint show?
No, it's just like regular glue joints, Anthony. It's just the same. I mean, look, can you see that that's veneer on that corner? Once you break that edge, it just looks gorgeous. And the other thing about controlling the material like this with veneer is, you see what I did? I've got both surfaces have ribbon or quarter sawn figure. This was something they would select for quarter sawn, or sometimes glue up the legs in the Craftsman period for the linear grain. But it's hard to achieve that without going to extreme lengths to get that grain on two exterior surfaces, but we just got it. Usually if you're seeing quarter here, you're seeing plain here, but you get this beautiful effect because you're controlling the grain. And then on the inside, we're still cherry. Look at, it's a nice wood, it's strong. It'd be great. Let's just get it on the foot. You put it up under the foot and it looks like mahogany, right? Because it's dark. So we're getting the best of both worlds. We didn't have to spend a lot of money for this. We controlled a really fine material and we applied it to be most visually pleasing for the project we're dealing with. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. That was really fun. I get excited about this. I had forgotten about this technique. Now, you don't have to iron on. You can do the veneering over regular material with whatever you want, and you can create some really amazing pieces using veneer, almost like exotic paint.